Andy and I were after that.
Okay.
And you would get like a Christmas card. Should I get excited?
Okay, I'm calling to order the December 14th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission, City of Sugar Land. Item 3A, members of the public desiring to address the commission with regard to matters on the agenda. Do we have anyone tonight? No? Okay. We have anybody virtually or anybody submitted? Okay. Just for the public hearing. Okay. All right, that being the case, we'll move on. Item 4A, minutes. These are going to be approved simultaneously. Consideration and action on the minutes of November 9th, 2021 P&Z Commission meeting and November 16th, 2021 City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission joint workshop meeting. Any revisions or comments? Anybody
I'll make
has?
a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I'll have a second. Okay. All those, guess we vote.
Mine is not up. There it is.
Okay. Passes unanimously of those present. Next item, public hearing. Receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed rezoning from the Hill Area Residential HR1 to Standard Single Family Residential R1 for approximately 7.54 acres for Cleveland Lake Sections 1, 2, and 3. Do we have anyone? And Abigail's going to tell us about that. Thank you.
Yes, I will. Yes, so for tonight's agenda, I'm going to be covering some background as to why we are here. And then I will go through kind of an engagement process that we did with residents of the proposed rezoning area and surrounding area as well. And then I will be covering council's feedback, some points for your consideration. And then from there, we'll move into the public hearing. And it is for consideration and action tonight. However, if the commission does not feel comfortable making a motion, then that is fine too. Here. There we go. So you may have, I have presented this graphic to you before. This is a graphic of the phase 1 public engagement process for the Hill Community Engagement Strategic Project. So that project had kicked off in 2018, and the commission reviewed regulations back in, I believe, in the summer to adopt regulation changes to the HR1 zoning district. And so the reason, so the engagement process started again back in 2018, and that project boundary looked at the Hill neighborhood starting from 1st Street to 7th Street, and the south side of Lakeview Drive east of Wood Street. And so that was the current zoning district at the time in 2018. However, the houses on the north side of the street are very similar in character to the rest of the Hill neighborhood and the HR1 zoning district. And so those were included in the project boundary as well for this project. And so one of the first things that we asked the community when we were kicking off this project was whether that boundary was representative of what they identified as the Hill neighborhood to be. We received positive support there, and so we can kind of continue the course in gathering input from the community for that boundary and continue to involve the property owners on the east side of Lakeview Drive. And so we continued. We also heard some support for including the houses north of Lakeview Drive into the HR1 zoning district because they were zoned as R1. And I'll have a map later in my slides to kind of help clear that up because I'm sure you're trying to visualize what I'm talking about here. But I'm trying to provide just some background information there. So the point I'm trying to make is we got support on kind of that overall boundary in the phase one public engagement process. So we continued the course there. And then in the phase two, the implementation process, and here is the map that I was referring to. We continued with implementation. And so one of the first things that we did, because we did hear support from this north side of the street that was previously R1 and was rezoned into the HR1 district in July of 2020, was that they thought that they should be a part of it. So we went ahead and rezoned that area. Then in July of 2021, during the final implementation, that's when we revised and added regulations to the HR1 zoning district to maintain the character of that area. And so that included, those changes were going to affect or are now in effect to the current HR1 zoning district. So that this whole area right here, including the houses north of Lakeview Drive that were recently added in July of 2020. And so those were regulations such as building width related to tree preservation and building finishes. During the adoption process of the changes to the HR1 regulations in the summer, during a council public hearing, we heard some concerns from Lakeview residents east of Wood Street regarding these changes and indicated a desire to be removed from the HR1 zoning district. And so that would be the area east of Wood Street. Wood Street is here, and so all of this area. And so council did go ahead and adopt the HR1 regulations, and directed us to engage with Lakeview residents in that area to understand their concerns and come up with a solution on how to address those. And so with that, we met with the residents, with 5 residents of Lakeview on August 5th, where we provided a presentation with information on zoning, what zoning is, how that differs from an HOA, and just the project history, and then also kind of the comparisons between the HR1 regulations and the R1 regulations. And so we proposed to have a meeting with the overall neighborhood. However, upon further discussion, the group agreed to have a city-produced mailer instead of a public meeting, so that way the rest of the residents could provide input as to whether they wanted to be rezoned or if they wanted to maintain the HR1 zoning district. So with that, in later that month, on August 20th, 2021, we mailed a letter to all 57 property owners in that area and kind of asked that question of whether they wanted to remain HR1 or be rezoned, and provided supplementary zoning materials. That way they can make an informed decision on whether they wanted to stay or be rezoned. And so that deadline originally was September 17th for them to provide input, and then it was extended on October 6th for those properties who had not responded. So here is a map of the area and who responded and how they responded as well. So the yellow indicates that they responded that they'd like to be rezoned to R1, and the orange indicates that they wanted to remain in the HR1 or the Hill zoning district. And so this is the question that we posed to the property owners in that area. So the overall results, we got a 74% response rate, which is very, very good for this area. However, the results did come back split right down the middle, 21 to 21, so 50%. And so we kind of looked at it by the north side of the street and the south side of the street to see if that there was a majority in any way there. For the north side of Lakeview Drive here, we got a 68% response rate. And 54% of those who responded indicated that they wanted to remain in the HR1 zoning district. And here are the number breakdowns there. For the south side, we got an 84% response rate, and 56 of those who responded indicated that they wanted to be rezoned. And so that was a difference of 2 properties that indicated that essentially put it over into the majority of wanting to be rezoned. And then compared to the phase 1 results, we did receive a much higher response rate. However, because the results are split right down the middle on the overall area, they're kind of inconclusive. We did get a stronger direction from the north side compared to the phase 1 engagement to remain in the HR1 just based on the total number of responses. And then also that slight majority, 54% for the north side. We also got a higher response rate from the south side with a slight majority wanting to be rezoned, with that being 56% of those who responded. So because the results were so close, we presented the results to City Council in a November 16th workshop. We did receive 1 public comment expressing desire to be rezoned, one of the property owners in the area. And Council did not state opposition with staff's recommendation to rezone the south side of Lakeview, just based on the results that we received during that engagement process. And that being to rezone the south side from HR1 to R1. So for the area that is being proposed tonight for rezoning is the Cleveland Lake area. So this south side of Lakeview here, it's composed of 3 different sections. These areas were platted between 1949 and 1957, and so the current zoning is HR1, and it's being proposed to be rezoned to R1. The future land use map classifies this area as company town neighborhood, and the land use plan does state that this land use can be implemented with either the HR1 zoning district or the R1 zoning district. So the rezoning would be consistent with the future land use map. And then for some points for your consideration, the proposed rezoning is a result of the engagement with property owners in this area who are desiring to be rezoned. The existing building pattern is consistent with the R1 zoning and also consistent with the future land use map and not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. As far as the public hearing, we did publish the notification in the newspaper, and a letter was sent to property owners being rezoned and property owners within 200 feet of the rezoning. We did receive 1 comment in support of the rezoning via our online comment form. And so with that, recommendation is to hold the public hearing followed by discussion and direction. And then after closing the public hearing, that would be the point where the commission would take consideration and action. If the commission feels comfortable to do so. And then staff's recommendation is for the commission to provide a recommendation of approval to City Council on the proposed rezoning from HR1 to R1 of Cleveland Lake Sections 1, 2, and 3. And thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. I believe technically I already opened. No? All right. At this time, I'd like to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed rezoning of the Hill area. Residential HR-1 to standard single-family residential R1 for approximately 7.54 acres for Cleveland Lake Sections 1, 2, and 3. So, do we have anybody who wants to speak on that? Oh, I'm sorry. Melissa Hoffman? Hi, Melissa.
Hello. Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you. My name is Melissa Hoffman. I'm a 28-year resident at 1 Cleveland Drive on the Hill on the southern side of Lakeview that we're discussing. I also served on the Citizens Redevelopment Committee for the Hill for the last few years. So longtime residents and newcomers alike shared their concern for maintaining the character of the Hill So, along with city staff's hard work, guidelines were put into place to manage the size and scale of future developments and remodels, helping to address residents' concerns. But recently, a few neighbors on the south side of Lakeview voiced concerns about the regulations. I would guess these residents enjoy identifying themselves as residents of the Hill, but they don't want to hold, I don't know why, they don't want to be held to the same standards as the rest of the neighborhood to maintain the character and the historical significance of the neighborhood. But it's not only the residents on the south side that are going to be impacted by the change. Take 615 Lakeview on the north side of Lakeview. Their home is appraised at $168,000 and is less than 1,000 square feet in livable space. Now, their neighbors across the street at 610 Lakeview, who are actually in favor of the rezoning and who coincidentally had a for sale sign in their front yard recently, if R1 zoning was used, that property owner could build a home using the FAR, the Florida Area Ratio, of 8,100 square feet. Taking into consideration the other standards and limiters, of course, may change that, but you can see it's a significant size. So, in contrast, the HR1 FAR would allow a home of 5,100 square feet, still double the existing size of 2251 right now, and much larger than the average home is being used on the market now. So, but what about the neighbors even on the other side who've invested in remodeling and maintaining their historic ranch homes? So let's go back to that R1 zoning. Imagine an 8,000 square foot house towering over its 1,000 square foot neighbor. Don't just think physically, think financially. Imagine how the taxes are going to increase on that 1,000 square foot home and on the neighbors of either side. The appraisal district just sees a house on that street and the valuation, and they make an appraisal adjustment. Trust me, I've fought it for years. There have been several attractive remodel jobs along Lakeview that have preserved the character, but still enabled a modern family in 2021 to enjoy a home that was originally built in the 40s and 50s. So I'd ask you not to repeal the current zoning and help protect the neighbors, both physically and financially, on both the north and the south side, for those of us who are invested in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there anyone else I have on?
Yes. Since Melissa was,
I'm sorry, could you submit the
I didn't know submitting it.
speaker registration?
But since Melissa called out 610 Lakeview, I live at 610 Lakeview.
Okay, could you?
She said there was a for sale sign in the yard.
could
There
you-
was not.
Sorry, you need to address the.
Yeah.
Well, I'm speaking to Melissa because she quoted something incorrectly.
Could, yeah.
My name is Jerry Crawford. I live at 610 Lakeview.
When you're finished, you'll need to turn in a speaker registration, please, but
I
go
will.
ahead.
The sign said,
Sir, you have to address us, I'm sorry.
those homes are totally different from the other end. We knocked on doors and asked each one of those residents on the south side. These people live at the other end of the street, do not live in the neighborhood, yet they want to control the whole neighborhood. Now, she's correct. The house across the street is valued at that. Do you want those houses to continue to deteriorate like they are on the north side? Great. There's no 8,000 square foot houses built on my side and won't be. But you can exaggerate those numbers, I know. But I live at 610. And I said, because the house next door was sold at auction of somewhat through the courts, I just put up a sign in my yard that said available soon. That's all. I didn't say it was available for what. I just wanted to see what the market and what people were talking about in my neighborhood. And after a few days, I took it down. But I didn't have a for sale sign. And so to misquote things like that is the same reason she stood up and misquoted numbers that would improve this neighborhood, improve the future of this neighborhood. And there would be nice new redevelopment, but not the things she talked about. It doesn't make sense. Nobody's going to build an 8,000-foot house in that neighborhood. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and guess we'll go into consideration of an action on the recommendation, or we'll discuss it. That's what we're going to do. Does commission have any questions for for Abigail? Or do we have anything we want to discuss?
I have one question at least. So Abigail, it sounded to me, though, that the polling that you've done and for the south side, it's within two homes of for and against, or, right? So is there risk that if we were to change this, there gets to be growing demand or further discussion, and the homeowners then come back and say, well, no, that's not really what we wanted. We want to go back into the HR1 zone? I mean, is that a possibility, or is that when they move, then it's a done deal?
Well, if there were to be new residents that would come in and could, not be happy with the zoning, then they could approach the city and want to
Rezone
go
it back.
through a similar process, yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to how that would work. Thank you.
Taylor?
Abby, is there precedent? I guess I'm struggling to understand a bit. I know there was extensive process over the last however many years that resulted in a new zoning designation for the Hill neighborhood, correct?
The zoning district was already in place.
Right.
What changed was the regulations for the district.
But the HR1 was that whole area, the area that we're discussing this evening, was in fact rezoned as a result of that process. Is that right?
No, so it's the north side that was rezoned,
Okay.
but they decided that they wanted to stay HR1 because they were recently rezoned in 2020 from R1 to HR1. And so the area that we're talking about is on the south side, who has always been HR1 and is now wanting to be rezoned to R1. So I know it's a little bit, if
Okay.
I pull up the slide.
I'll speak for myself only. That's really confusing.
Sorry.
So I guess what I'm trying to better understand is, you know what? Let me just indulge for myself. Can you explain that again? Because I'm trying to wrap my mind around the. So let's go back before any of the public input process took place around the Hill neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
What was the zoning designation? Let's just call it 10 years ago.
So the area that's being proposed for rezoning tonight, which is the south side of Lakeview, that was zoned HR1. And it's been zoned that way since 1997.
So the south side was HR1.
A different HR1.
Hang on. Do I have that right? The south side was HR1?
Hold on, I'm pulling up. Here we go. Right, so this area here, HR1, yes. And so this is the
Been
area.
that way since 97.
Correct.
And then as a result of so then take me through what happened after the Hill discussion. Forgive me I can't remember the exact name of what that effort was called, but it happened over the last few years.
Sure. So we went through the public engagement process. We got some recommendations, and we proceeded with phase 2, which was to implement those recommendations. One of them being rezoning the north side. And so when we heard concerns from this area here, it included concerns from the north side as well. And so we engaged with the area as a whole. However, the results for the north were to stay HR1. And so that is going to stay. The results on the south side, however, were to be, the results came back as the property owners indicated that they wanted to be rezoned from HR1 to R1. So the only area that is being considered tonight is the south side here.
So the north side was,
Previously R1, and
so there were
through.
two separate zoning designations for those two areas over the last number of years.
Correct.
And then as a result of the engagement process with residents on the Hill, the south side and, I'm sorry, the north side and the Hill area was added to HR1 designation. Is that right?
Right, just due to the character and support through the engagement process to do that, because the homes on the north side are very similar in character to the rest
Right.
of the hill here.
Okay, I think I understand that now. So I guess then the other piece of this, so we've got what's before us is from HR1 to R1. And as a result of that, if you just take, for instance, the Florida area ratio, that would take, currently, you've got 0.5, and then you make a switch, and it would go to 0.71. Is that right?
Correct. The FAR for R1 is larger than what is allowed in HR1.
Yeah, and without trying to embarrass myself by doing arithmetic, that could, the general result of that could be a much larger, almost not quite double, but almost double the size of a structure that could go on that lot if it remained the current zoning designation it has today.
If the area on the south side of Lakeview were rezoned from HR1 to R1, then it would be a larger home could be
Yeah.
built in that area, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm, and I guess the other, so I think I understand all the impact. So I don't know the right question to ask here necessarily, but is it common for us to as a city to go and I mean, you know, and ask areas, do they want to be rezoned? Is that something that we typically engage in, or is this totally an outlier of a case?
So typically, the rezoning is property by property basis. However, because this area, we heard that property owners in this area did contact their council members, and it wasn't just one person. It was several people who did express that concern. And so the
concern being that
That-
it's a piecemeal approach, or what is the concern? that's
the
expressed?
concerns were towards the regulations that were going to be adopted with the HR1 zoning district, or the changes that were made to the HR1 zoning district regulations. That's what the concern was, that we heard that they might have been too restrictive and kind of things along those lines with the regulations.
In a hypothetical scenario, could I go and you know, get enough of my neighbors to together and get my city councilman stirred up about rezoning our neighborhood? Does that happen? Like, what's the, I guess that's what I don't quite, I guess this just feels, while, I mean, public input is hugely important. We're all residents, right? I mean, that's why we're here. But I don't know, it just strikes me as odd that we're discussing, you know, these sort of discrete plots in and around the city. But, so I don't know if there's necessarily a question in there, but that just strikes me as odd, so.
It's not our typical process, I will say that.
Okay. All right, I'll stop for now.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah. Tim, do you have any questions? Any concerns?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you both for coming out. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you came out. It's nice that there's some public sentiment and that you took your time to come and speak in front of us. And I do, no matter what happens, you know, this is how the process works, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure all the other committee members appreciate it also. So it was 50-50 overall, but the south side, the one that wants to be changed, was 2 in favor of being changed?
Correct.
Okay. The differences between HR1 and R1, it's primarily just the size of the structure, right?
Correct. There's some other things related to like tree preservation and building finishes in the HR1 district as well. But related to the size of the structures, that would be one of the major differences. Yes.
And is this neighborhood on both sides typical of what the HR1 requirements are about? Meaning, the HR1 was tailored to meet the character of the neighborhood in this location also? Is that, am I saying that right? Meaning, they've rezoned it to HR1 because of the character of the hill, and this fits that character
So
in
then,
current format?
so the reason that the south side, that area has always been HR1, and so through the process, we didn't hear necessarily, concerns of, hey, we don't want to be a part of this process or anything like that. And so because it was already part of that zoning district, we kind of continued the course. And so the north side was the one that was added in. And so now that the regulations, as we were going through that adoption of the regulations, and so that's when we heard the concerns with the residents in the area that, also on the south side, that they no longer wanted to be part of that HR1 zoning district because of the modified and additional regulations that would be taking place with the HR1 district.
So if we pass or recommend that they rezone the southern side to R1, then the impacts to the north side occur during redevelopment. Is that correct?
Correct.
If it becomes a tear down neighborhood or whatever. So then when staff is making this recommendation, and I'm sure it's not on public input, what's the benefit to the city as a whole? Because we don't do this every time and take a poll on every neighborhood about what they want to be zoned. What's the benefit to the city as a whole that made staff recommend? And I'm not trying to put you on the point, but I am, on the south side. What's the benefit to the city? Is it just strictly for redevelopment, a tax base? Is it for public sentiment? I'm just wondering, why did staff recommend that we rezone the southern side?
Yes, it was based on the public input that we received.
Straight on public input.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, we weren't necessarily thinking, oh, the city's going to gain so many dollars or anything like that but that was not the reason behind staff's recommendation, no.
Okay. All right. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
The public hearing has closed, so no further comments from the public.
I'm sorry?
Since the public hearing has closed, we can receive no further comments from the public.
Oh, all right, thank you.
That's something.
Go ahead.
Just a
JP.
minor question, and then just to reiterate my colleagues there. There's nothing in these changes that will change the designation from it being a company town or not, right? That's going to remain regardless of what's decided on the zoning regulations, is that correct?
On the future land use map, correct, that would stay as company town neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Landine that it's, there's no precedence for this, correct, in terms of how we're doing it. I certainly appreciate that it's a statistical tie, right? When you look at the overall, two houses were in favor of one way, but the level of detail that we've gone through as a city and the staff and the residents and the passion over the last 3 years or so, it seems amazing to me that, and I think it's a good thing for our communities to be this involved and be this vocal. Having said that, I think we have to consider what precedent this sets and, what we're telling other neighborhoods to Commissioner Landine's perspective. But a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours, a lot of discussion. We should applaud the citizens for being this dedicated and involved. So my perspective is that we need to think long and hard before we, take into consideration things like this. But I do admire and have great respect for the residents who came out and who were involved in the process, because it is, your home is the most important thing to you, and where you live and the pride that you have in your neighborhood is is really paramount, and especially the last 2 years since we've all been at home, during COVID and the pandemic. I think that's something to be noted, and really all I wanted to say about that was just that this is, that we should be very cautious before we kind of take this route and send a signal to other neighborhoods. That's all.
Thank you. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of read back through this earlier today, and as I understand it, I think linearly, so I have to think A to B to C to D. These properties you're talking about got pulled into HR1 back when it was rezoned. The changes were made to HR1 to change the characteristics of the lot and of the city, and as they went down that path, it was at that time, which was July of 2021, during phase 2 of that the citizens in these homes came forward and said, some of them came forward and said, we don't want to abide by the HR1, the new HR1 guidelines, correct? So it was citizen-driven, it wasn't the city going to the citizenry, correct?
Correct, yes, we heard concerns from.
So they came forward, and that's what started this process, was from the citizens, or some of the citizens in that area that were asking and did not want to be pulled forward into the HR1. So it wasn't a revenue piece, it wasn't anything like that. It was simply, we had some citizens that owned homes in this area that were concerned about, from their perspective, those homes and what they wanted and the rules in their neighborhood and their homes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Again, it's a lot to consider. I mean, it's a 50-50 split with a very marginal number of people that responded to it. And it, it's one of those things, a lot of people don't realize what the power of one vote can be, and so I thank the citizens for coming forward and sharing your concerns with us. It means a lot. I know there's passion on both sides. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I have some questions and thoughts. I noticed in the case analysis, the paragraph on page 3, second paragraph, says Cleveland Lake was originally zoned R1. However, with the new zoning map in 1997, it was rezoned HR1. And even staff is not aware of why it was originally included in the HR1 district. And during the Hill project, the south side of Lakeview did not express a desire to be rezoned, so consideration was not given to remove it until now. And that's fine. The homes in Cleveland Lakes are all 50s ranch-style homes and are more similar in character to R1 homes. That's interesting to me. My question is, if we set, if this is rezoned to R, if 1, 2, and 3, Cleveland Lakes 1, 2, and 3 are rezoned to R1, we'll have HR1 on one side of the street and R1 on the other side of the street, correct?
Correct.
Do we have places within the city where that occurs, or do we at all facilitate that, or do we discourage it? Is there any precedent or any boundary you can point to say, well, that occurs here, here, and here? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but.
Sure. One example is right across Highway 90 with the Mixed Use Conservation District. So the west side of Brook Street is MUC, Mixed Use Conservation Zoning District. And I believe and Doug may need to help me on the R1R. On the other side of the street, it's R1R.
Okay. And that's in Old Sugar Land.
Correct.
Let me put a caveat on my question then. Is that anything we do in the, more recently developed? I mean, let's face it, those were company houses and so forth, much like the Hill. They were constructed a long time ago, and they face Brook Street, right? That's what you said?
Yes.
So there was good reason to facilitate retail and other uses, so that works. And Brook's a wider street. That's a finer point, but this is just a local street. And I realize that, an 8,000 square foot house being built on the south side is unlikely. But if the code allows it, then the code allows it. So where I'm going is, I'm concerned that we will, if we approve this, that we will set up this, I don't know what the word is. Governing by petition. I was thinking more of a dichotomy, but I don't know if that's the right word. Just that, at some point over the course of time, we're going to have, nicer, bigger homes on those south side in these three sections, whereas HR1 on the other side of the street will strive to maintain its character and age and so forth and so on. And size, they're limited in what they can do. So it would be an odd situation that the city facilitated by agreeing to this or recommending this change in zoning. So I guess I'm just offering thoughts. I don't think there was a question in there. I think you answered my question, but I see that it has some trappings just because of its residential nature. Everybody's good intentions aside, all the hard work that's gone in, when you have a neighborhood that's got a certain character to it, in this town especially, that's pretty valuable because there's a lot of change and a lot of new and so forth and so on. So I'm good. I appreciate your answer. Thank you. Is there anybody else that?
Can I just, for clarification, so that it was originally HR1 in 1997?
Yes, this area.
And then in
since then.
2021, HR1 was changed.
The regulations for the HR1 district were modified, and then there were additional regulations as well.
Can you just, and I apologize, I probably should know what they were. Can you just tell me what the changes were?
Sure.
Or tell us?
In your staff report,
Is it in-
I believe there is a page
No,
5
the
of
table
your
was
staff
R1 to
report.
HR1. I want to see what the old HR1 was to the new HR1.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
I knew
what
what, I had,
Okay.
I got that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
So the
I'm pretty
old,
slow, but I'm not that slow.
I guess what we're calling the old pre 2020 even, because in 2020 there were some changes as well. Pre 2020 HR1 zoning district regulations were pretty similar to the R1 regulations, with very, very few exceptions. One of them being the garage setbacks were 1.5 feet from side and rear. The maximum height was 27 feet to mid-gable. And so in 2021, we changed the maximum height to be 27 feet to the top of the ridge. There was a maximum lot width for HR1 that I believe R1 does not have. And then I believe there was one other one related to garages.
So when it was more, I guess, amenable to building a larger house, how many larger houses were built from 1997 to 2020?
In the whole HR1 district, or in
in this area.
I believe maybe one added a second story, I believe, but I think it used the existing footprint. I know there's another one who added an addition in the rear, and I believe they also might have added a second story to that addition. I'm not quite certain if they did an addition to the front part as well, the second story addition, I mean. But there have not been tear downs and rebuilds in that part of the neighborhood. They're all original.
Would any of those additions be allowed under the HR1? That is the current HR1.
In the current, I believe the rear addition would be limited by the building width. The building width in the HR1 district is limited by the lot width, so that they would be limited there by the 0.46 ratio. And then they can still build a second story, and that would be limited to the 27 feet to the top of the ridge for the current HR1 district.
Was the FAR bigger, larger in the old HR1?
It was the same as the R1. It was.
It was 7.1?
correct.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Mary.
So just for clarity, when you were talking about what has been done since, because I think what started this way back in 2020 with the review of the Hill is that there were some larger homes that were built. And then I think the homeowners had gotten together and said, well, hey, maybe we need to look at, of what the zoning regulations are, correct?
Right. So we told them that the zoning regulations were going to be our tool to be able to maintain that character of the redevelopment, because the character really is the kind of the size of the homes. However, we did understand that we don't want to be so limited as to not allow redevelopment, and so that's kind of, there needed to be a balance between having only a 600 square foot home versus a 4,000 square foot home, and so there needed to be some balance there, and so that's kind of what that's what was adopted here.
With the new HR1.
Correct. Still allowing for larger homes than what is there.
But between 1997 and in 2020, were there homes that were based on this FAR of 0.71 that are in the neighborhood currently?
In this
In the Hill?
in this other area here,
Yeah.
right here, in the west of Wood Street. Yes.
So there could be some homes that have been built on that size.
Yes, there were homes that were built that were larger than was existing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah,
So I don't know if we need a motion on this, but I'd like to maybe move that we table this item for the evening and request that staff produce a report for us or come back to us with information just to specifically around letting us know if there are residential areas in other places in the city that have different zoning designations but are adjacent to one another. Because I think that's an important point that we need to be fully informed on, so that from a zoning perspective, we're not opening up the opportunity for us to create basically piecemeal zoning throughout the city based on it could create a lot of confusion. So I'd like to know the answer to that. And so I don't know if we need anything formal, but that would be, I move that we just table this for the evening, pending staff coming back with that information.
well, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Can I ask another question before
Yes.
we continue with the motion? Just let me clarify again. So the only restrictions that the changing to, or the only benefits is for redevelopment, to change back to R1, not for a current homeowner is not constrained unrealistically on what they can do to their current home by being an HR1 rather than R1 in terms of additions and
Redevelopment could still take
it's solely
place
for
in
redevelopment.
both.
So the impact then is the character of the area, even though that one side of the street is a different subdivision. It impacts the character of the whole area if the one side has a different zoning than the north side. And that's strictly on a redevelopment standpoint, correct?
Yes, correct. Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Okay, yes, I misunderstood your question. Yes, it would also apply to additions, both for new tear down and rebuild, as well as any additions that are added on to the
Okay.
existing
So it
home.
does affect their FAR on an addition side?
Correct.
Okay, so it does limit them on what they can build. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no more discussion, we have a motion on the table. Do I have a second? I'd like to second it, if that's all right. So, I guess we vote?
Do we need a voice vote, probably? Just probably hand vote, right? You want me to restate?
Yeah, why don't you restate it?
Yeah, so I just make a motion to table this discussion for this evening pending a staff report that helps us better understand other residential areas inside the city of Sugar Land that have different zoning designations but are adjacent to one another.
Okay. And I seconded it, so, and it's we can vote now.
The vote up is not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah.
But in our motion, we'll put that y'all are tabling for the next.
Right. Right. I assumed you would do that. Yeah, what appeared on our screen was the original action. Okay, it passed unanimously with those present, so that's been tabled. Thank you very much, Abigail, and we'll talk again. Thank you. Okay, next item, 5B. Receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed amendment to the Plan Development District, the crossing of Telfair, Section 4, Part 1, Ordinance 1863, 9.7 acres, located at State Highway 6 to the immediate east of US Highway 90, adding veterinary services, SIC code 0742, tobacco stores with lounge, SIC code 5993, and calling out CBD retail under SIC 5912 and vape store under SIC 5999 as specific uses. And Laura, I think?
Yes. I am joining you guys remotely. I'm a little under the weather this evening. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the crossing at Telfair, Section 4, Part 1. This is Ordinance 1863 near US 90A. Why is this not moving? Sorry. Okay, there it goes. This is near University at Highway 6 and Highway 90. The existing structure is next to the HEB there, I believe. This is a fully built-out PD. The buildings are built, the parking lot is there. And so this amendment is to just add 2 land uses as well as specifically call out a couple of uses. So as I said, it's fully built. So you can see the purple buildings there is in the excerpt from the existing PD. The pinky peach color is parking, and then red would be the driving aisles. This is a request to add both vet services and tobacco stores and tobacco bar. So a tobacco bar is a place where you can consume tobacco on site rather than just buying the tobacco and leaving. And then calling out specifically CBD and vape retail stores. As I mentioned, the PD is built, so this is only requested due to changing market demands for tenant spaces. And there would be no changes to the PD aside from the land uses. So all of the other exhibits and maps, layouts, that kind of thing would all remain the same. So the draft use list here just calls out those specific uses that are being added, as well as shows the conditions for veterinary services. So that would put a size cap on vet services not to exceed 10,000. Currently, I do believe the tenant space that's being proposed to be veterinary services is about 3,000 square feet. This would have no breeding of animals with the exception of those that are recovering from medical procedure. So there is no optional boarding and vet services. It is just the vet services, as well as it would require an outdoor area that is very near to the rear door that would have to be cleaned on a daily basis, a maximum size of 20 by 20 feet, and fencing would have to be wrought iron or masonry, no chain link. This would also not be able to be located in the parking lot. It would not. The parking would still have to meet the current conditions. Additionally, there are conditions for the retail tobacco store and tobacco bars that would have to adhere with our smoking in public places ordinance. That's through our code of ordinances, not our zoning district. And that does require separation of food and drink from smoking. That would still be standard. So all of these potential uses would still have to comply with our smoking in public places ordinance. So again, the vet services does allow for a small clinic with limited exterior runs. And we did suggest the notes to include the maximum square footage and fence materials. The tobacco stores and bars would allow tobacco sales with or without on-site consumption. But they would still have to require with our separation of food and drink public places ordinance. And then CBD and vape retail stores are technically already allowed. This amendment would just call them out specifically in order to confirm this use as the interpretation of the PD. So your initial points for consideration this evening are that the land uses are allowed by right in the general business B2 district, and they appear to be compatible with the existing PD. There are no nearby residential districts, so there's minimal concerns about mitigation or impact on surrounding property owners. We did suggest a couple of notes, including maximum size of animal runs and the requirement for wrought iron or masonry fencing. And again, CBD and vape sales are already allowed by right. This is just clarifying where they are categorized in the PD. Public hearing notice requirements were all met, a notification in the paper and online, as well as mailers sent out to property owners within 200 feet. An online form was made available in addition to all of these, and staff has received no inquiries and is not aware of any opposition to this amendment. Therefore, staff does recommend holding the public hearing followed by discussion and direction. PNC can request further research, conditions, or notes to be added. Consideration action would follow at a subsequent meeting. And we do have Peter Jacob present for questions, but there's no presentation due to the limited scope and nature of the amendment, since it's just in the use list. Staff and Peter have answered any questions after the close of the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Let's open the discussion. We'll start on this side. Commissioner Brown? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I did it again. Okay. We're going to receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed amendment to the Plan Development District, PD District, the Crossing of Telfair, Section 4, Part 1, Ordinance 1863. 9.78 acres located at State Highway 6 to the immediate east of U.S. Highway 90, adding veterinary services, SIC 0742, tobacco stores with lounge, SIC 5993, and calling out CBD retail under SIC 5912 and vape store under SIC 5999 as specific uses. Okay, Commissioner Brown. Oh, is there anyone present that would like to speak? Seeing none. Commissioner Brown. I have to close the public hearing. I'm going to get this. If I do this more frequently, it just might happen. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you all for your patience. Commissioner Brown has nothing to say, so I'll go, still, I'll go to Commissioner Smith.
Things. Laura, why were these originally, do we know why these particular items were originally not in the Plan Development District? Why they were excluded?
Peter can most likely answer that. I believe he's the one who helped write the original ordinance. I'm not sure why they were left off initially, except for that there was no demand for them in the center.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Peter Jacob. I'm with Rubicon Realty Group. I am the developer for the crossing at Telfair, originally 112 acres. This particular section was part one of several sections within the overall development. Some of it, I would say, would be, to answer your question, Commissioner Smith, specifically the vape and the CBD. You know, back when we initially proposed the PD with the uses, those weren't really anything that was uses, a retail use that was out there. You know, so we kind of looked at it, and we've had some inquiries. We've had some people that, you know, have approached us about opening up those particular uses. I will say that probably the other two were somewhat of an oversight. Initially, we had a lot of land to sell at that time when this went into effect, and you know, the veterinary service was most looked at as being freestanding, a freestanding clinic. We've never been able to address that particular use in a freestanding clinic. Most of them have been medical. A couple of them are under construction right now. So it was a little bit of an oversight on my part, not including that in there. And the tobacco store kind of was something that we had considered. We kind of looked at it and said, okay, is this really something that, you know, is that important? If could the commissioners say, you know, if there's anything that I want to give up, I'd say give up that use. The other three definitely as a compromise, which, you know, we don't see in our federal legislature. I'm willing to rescind that particular component. But the veterinary clinic was something that was an oversight, and like I said, we were looking to try to sell land for that, and we weren't successful in. But we have been approached by some by a couple of private practitioners to go ahead and open up a clinic. I would like to clear up one thing on the presentation. I want to give you an idea of runs. You know, when I think of a run, I think of, you know, a number of, you know, long areas where the dogs can, you know, run back and forth. That's not the intent here. Basically, the run is to take the dog out in the back in a fenced area to relieve itself during the day, you know, maybe after surgery, and then bring it back in. It's not like the dogs are going to be out there, you know, as you would see in a typical boarding operation. This is just for medical, and you know, it's going to be a small area in the back of the shopping center. We do have some green space there that we can fence off and not necessarily lose any parking.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So another question, which you addressed a little bit with the tobacco use. So if this were allowed, so with if I read it correctly, you could use tobacco on the premises. So does that allow for something like a hookah lounge as well? Is this were allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, so by allowing for on-site or sales, you can have a hookah lounge. It would be for consuming the tobacco only. This is where the separation of food and drink comes into play. A lot of times we want people who want to open a restaurant and also serve hookah. That would not be allowed. They would have to be kept separate. But you could have a lounge where you come in, smoke your hookah with the flavors and all that, and then go ahead and leave.
Yeah. So if this were allowed, then within that area, you could have like a hookah lounge next to like a current tenant that's in there. So I do know that there's one tenant in there that's sort of a playtime for children, or a place where you can have parties.
Yeah.
So if this were all addressed, you could have these side by side in that strip center there, correct?
I would say that is a possibility,
Yes.
You know, what I was envisioning, to be honest with you, is similar to what we have here in Sugar Land Town Center with the cigar bar. That's really what my intent was on that, and I don't know if that's something that maybe needs to be clarified. The hookah bar thing did not even come into, my mind as far as a use that I would look to be putting into the shopping center.
Yeah.
But you do have a good point, frogs, snails, and fairy tales
Correct.
is in there. I do have vacant space adjacent to it.
Exactly.
So, maybe there's a way that, if it is allowed, that there are certain restrictions placed on it where, it's not going to interfere with, a business that is either like a daycare or children or something of that effect. Staff and I can work on that if it's approved.
So I'm guessing if that were the case, and Laura, you'd have to help me out here, I mean, can you put all those specific regulations within a PD around what can be side by side?
So you can, but before we get too far down that rabbit hole, I would say that there are specific smoking place specifically, building codes that are required for ventilation, extra units.
Oh, we just lost you. She doesn't know.
We'll keep it going.
I'm sorry, it dropped me.
Let's see if Laura's back here, if she needs to be. Laura,
Back.
what Laura was explaining was there's a number of code of ordinances and building codes, ventilation elements, some of those things that are already in place to seal that off. Something that we could examine, though, also would be the possibility of some type of distance requirements or some other things. We can talk with Peter and his group about some things that might head that off at the pass, so to speak, from that, from certain uses. So I feel pretty confident that we can take a look at that from a simple, straightforward way, but also a kind of ease those concerns.
Okay. And then the other one was around with the vet services. So I know that there's a number of eatery places along in that space as well. And I know that you'd put in some comments around, having to clean up every day. I'm thinking we need something where you're at least cleaning the outside or the facade of the vet services as well. Well aware I have a dog, and I know that there's a lot of good smells as you walk into a vet office, and if it were right next to an eatery, I'm not so sure that that particular,
And that's something that I can work on from a standpoint of, incorporating that into the actual lease document, that, it would be something that would be required of the veterinarian to maintain the exterior, of that area where the patients or the pet owners are bringing their dogs in and out.
Right.
That is something that I can control from that perspective, and, address it.
okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hart?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. You good?
Two hopefully straightforward questions. Laura, I'm curious on the related to the run in the back. Would the staff's recommendation on that as an allowable addition to the property, would it be different if there were in fact residential adjacent, or does that cause any concern?
So we have had some potential proximity issues in the past where staff would recommend putting the run not at the back because it backs up to single-family residential. However, because this is more commercial at the rear of the property, there are no concerns about impact on rear neighbors.
Gotcha. And I noticed on the staff recommendation that there was, I may have misread it, but a recommendation to create masonry versus chain link. It'd probably be good for us to develop some sort of commentary on that. And I'm just curious, Laura, from your perspective, what's the thinking on the recommended material for such an enclosure?
So staff did recommend either wrought iron or masonry because they hold up better and they look nicer. It's primarily aesthetic. So that's that is where that reasoning thought process came from. That's also something that we tend to require in PDs and conditional use permits is the higher quality of materials.
Got it. I for one, I mean, I think it'd be a great idea, Peter, just to go with the masonry, recognizing that costs are a factor, but just from a standpoint of long-term durability, that'd be something I'd strongly encourage you to consider.
Okay, I mean, we can surely incorporate that into the requirements for the PD in addition to some of the other ones.
If there's no heartburn there, then I would just suggest we do it as a
That's fine.
condition of the PD.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I don't have any comments, except appreciate, Laura, your work and your presentation, and your work as well, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I guess at this time, if I get this right, but as there's no more discussion on the proposed amendment, do I hear a motion? Pardon? Oh, good. All right. Next agenda item, something I can master. Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report. Who was there for November 16th? Are they present?
I was there for the November 16th.
Tim, thank you.
Yep. And I'll go as quick as I can. That was a Lakeview discussion also.
Okay.
It was interesting, and council discussed many of the same things that we did. I will say that they had hoped that there would be more public participation at P&Z, and I think we got one more person than they did at that council meeting for comment. Other things that affected us, the CUP got approved for the Porsche dealership. Greatwood interim R1I to permanent R1 passed. Fort Bend Mud 128 was annexed, and that passed. And Riverstone drainage improvements passed. And that was anything that was of concern to us, and then we had the workshop. So.
Did you take separate notes for the workshop?
I did. Do you want them?
If there's more to report.
There's a lot. I took 2 pages of notes on the workshop.
But I mean, is there anything that this commission needs to hear about? I mean, we're all there, I granted.
Well, no, I mean, they're all in the important ones are in the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Council meeting on December 7th, was that? All right, Commissioner Brown.
All right, High Point's moving. There was a reading of the Water Master Plan Ordinance 2252. Motion passed unanimously. We talked about that in the workshop. And the reading of the Wastewater Master Plan Ordinance 2255. Motion passed unanimously as well. There was a resolution 2134. Resolution 2137 for $5.4 million in bonds for reimbursement of the development of the Imperial Redevelopment District. That passed unanimously as well. And that's really the only things that would have affected us.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, staff report 6B. Doug.
We'll keep this brief. Our next meeting, when we'll see y'all, will be the January 11th. We're still working through items as far as that goes with a little time here. Other than that, we just want to wish everybody a great holiday season and Merry Christmas coming up. So
Thank you.
You'll have a break here.
Thank you. Y'all too.
Motion to
Okay.
adjourn?
Do I have a second? All those approve? Giddy up. We're adjourned. Thank y'all.